The sound of Savannah's wings beating against the hospital window was almost completely drowned out by the steady beep of medical equipment and hushed voices behind the glass. The African grey parrot, with her striking crimson tail feathers and intelligent eyes, had been perched on the same branch of the maple tree for hours, staring intently into room 307 of Mercer General Hospital. Inside, Frederick Wheeler lay motionless on the adjustable bed, his once robust frame now frail and diminished, tethered to life by clear tubes and blinking monitors. His face, though lined with evidence of a life fully lived, retained an elegance that hinted at the handsome man he had once been. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the sterile room, illuminating the solemn faces of those gathered around his bed. Dr. Jasmine Collins checked Frederick's vitals one last time, her graceful movements betraying the heaviness in her heart. With her chestnut hair pulled back in a neat bun and compassionate brown eyes, she embodied both professional competence and genuine empathy. This was the most difficult part of her job, and despite her years of experience, it never got easier. "Everything is prepared," she said softly, addressing Rachel, Frederick's daughter. "We can proceed whenever you're ready." Rachel nodded, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. She was a striking woman with features that echoed her father's distinguished appearance, though grief had hollowed her cheeks and dimmed the light in her eyes. "I just need a moment," she whispered, reaching for her father's hand. Frank Martinez, the charge nurse with broad shoulders and kind eyes, adjusted the IV line and stepped back respectfully. "Take all the time you need," he said, his deep voice gentle. "I'll be right outside." What none of them knew was that Savannah's presence at the window was no accident. The parrot had been visiting this same spot for weeks, drawn by something the hospital staff and even Frederick's family couldn't see or understand. Her previous owner had been an elderly professor of linguistics who had spent years teaching her not just to mimic words, but to understand their meaning and context. Savannah's vocabulary was extensive, her intelligence remarkable, and her perception unusually keen even for her species. Outside the window, Savannah's agitation grew more intense. Her feathers ruffled as she watched the scene unfold, her instincts screaming that something was deeply wrong. Not with the medical procedures, she couldn't comprehend those human complexities, but with the situation itself, there was a wrongness here that transcended her avian understanding, yet registered clearly in her heightened senses. Patrick Harris, the hospital administrator, entered the room with a clipboard of final documents requiring signatures. With his perfectly pressed suit and meticulously groomed silver hair, he carried an air of authority that seemed to fill the small space. "Ms. Wheeler, once you've signed these forms, Dr. Collins can proceed with the palliative sedation. Your father will feel no pain or discomfort." Rachel's hand trembled as she accepted the pen, her eyes fixed on her father's peaceful face. "Dad made his wishes very clear in his advance directive," she said, her voice breaking. "No extraordinary measures. A dignified end when the time came." Jasmine placed a comforting hand on Rachel's shoulder. "The stroke was massive. The damage is irreversible. We've done everything medically possible." As Patrick handed over the forms, a sudden commotion erupted from the hallway. Voices raised in surprise and alarm, followed by the sound of something crashing to the floor. Frank rushed back into the room, his calm demeanor momentarily disrupted. "I'm sorry, but there's a—" Before he could finish, a grey blur shot through the doorway, wings extended, and voice raised in a cacophony of sounds. Savannah circled the room once before landing directly on Frederick's bed, her claws carefully avoiding his still form. "What on earth?" Patrick exclaimed, stepping back in shock. "How did a bird get into the hospital?" Frank moved forward cautiously. "It flew in through the entrance when a patient was being brought in. We've been trying to catch it for the last 20 minutes. Jasmine reached for the call button. "We need to get it out of here immediately. This is completely unsanitary and inappropriate." But Savannah wasn't leaving. The parrot positioned herself on the bed rail beside Frederick's pillow, her intelligent eyes fixed first on the unconscious man, then on the paperwork in Rachel's hands. With startling clarity, the bird spoke. "Wake up, not sleeping, watching." The room fell silent, all eyes fixed on the parrot, who continued to bob her head urgently, repeating the phrase with increasing agitation. Rachel's hand froze mid-signature, the pen hovering over the final consent form. "Did that bird just—" Patrick began, unable to complete the thought. "Frank, please remove the bird," Jasmine insisted, though her professional composure had visibly faltered. But Frank hesitated, something about the parrot's behavior giving him pause. In his many years of nursing, he had learned to trust his instincts, and something about this strange interruption struck him as significant. "Wake up! Not sleeping, watching," Savannah repeated, her voice growing more insistent. Then she added something that made everyone in the room freeze. "Frederick knows. Frederick sees." Rachel dropped the pen, her eyes wide with disbelief. "How does it know my father's name? I never said it out loud." Savannah hopped closer to Frederick's face, her movements deliberate and focused. "Pills wrong. Doctor wrong." Patrick's face flushed with anger. "This is ridiculous. It's just mimicking random phrases it's heard somewhere. Frank, get that bird out of here now so we can proceed with dignity." But Jasmine raised her hand, silencing him. Years of medical training had taught her to consider all variables, no matter how unlikely or unexpected. "Wait," she said, her gaze shifting between Frederick and the parrot. "Something's not right." She moved closer to the bed, checking Frederick's pupils again with her penlight. Then she reviewed the medication chart hanging at the foot of the bed, flipping through pages with increasing concern. "What is it?" Rachel asked, her voice barely audible. Jasmine looked up, her expression troubled. "Some of these medication dosages don't match what I prescribed." She turned to Frank. "When did Dr. Mercer make rounds last?" Frank checked the chart. "Yesterday evening. He adjusted several medications." "Without consulting me?" Jasmine's voice held a note of controlled anger. "I'm the primary physician on this case." Patrick shifted uncomfortably. "Dr. Mercer is chief of neurology. He has the authority to—" "Not without discussing it with the attending physician," Jasmine interrupted. She turned back to Frederick, performing a more thorough examination. As her skilled hands moved methodically, checking reflexes and responses, a slight twitch in Frederick's finger caught her attention. "Rachel," she said slowly, "I want to run some additional tests before we proceed." "What kind of tests?" Rachel asked, hope and confusion battling in her voice. "An EEG, for starters. I need to re-evaluate your father's brain activity." Savannah, who had been watching intently, suddenly spoke again, this time in what sounded like a different voice entirely, deeper, more measured. "Check the locker. Green bottle." Frank's eyes widened. That sounds like Dr. Mercer's voice. I'd recognize it anywhere." Patrick's face had gone pale. "This is highly irregular. I must insist." But Rachel cut him off, a new determination in her voice. "Check the locker. My father's locker. Now." As Frank moved to the small cabinet where patients' personal belongings were stored, Savannah hopped onto Rachel's shoulder, her feathers brushing against the woman's tear-stained cheek. The parrot's eyes remained fixed on Frederick, as if standing guard. Frank opened the locker and rummaged through the few possessions inside. At the back, partially hidden beneath a folded sweater, he found a small green glass bottle with no label. "It's here," he said, holding it up carefully. "But I don't know what it is." Jasmine took the bottle, examining it closely before carefully removing the cap and sniffing the contents. Her expression hardened. "This needs to be analyzed immediately, and I want a complete toxicology panel run on Mr. Wheeler's blood right away." Patrick began to protest, but something in Jasmine's stance silenced him. The doctor turned to Rachel, her voice gentler but firm with new resolve. "The end-of-life procedures are on hold, indefinitely." As if in response, Frederick's monitor registered a slight change, nothing dramatic, but enough to suggest that somewhere, locked within his seemingly unconscious form, something was still fighting, still present. Savannah settled more comfortably on Rachel's shoulder, her mission not yet complete, but the first battle won. The mystery of Frederick Wheeler's condition, and the parrot who had intervened, was only beginning to unfold, threading together lives that would never be the same again after this extraordinary interruption. Outside the window, the afternoon light began to fade, casting long shadows across the hospital grounds. But inside room 307, a different kind of darkness was being illuminated, one that had nearly claimed a life and would soon reveal secrets that some had gone to great lengths to keep hidden. The hospital laboratory buzzed with unusual activity despite the late hour. Jasmine stood watching as technicians analyzed the contents of the mysterious green bottle, her determined expression masking her inner turmoil. The preliminary toxicology results from Frederick's blood had already raised alarming questions that she couldn't ignore. The substance contains a combination of sedatives that don't appear in any of his prescribed medications, explained the lab technician, sliding a report across the counter. More concerning is the presence of a compound that mimics the brain chemistry of someone in an irreversible comatose state. Jasmine's fingers tightened around the report. So someone wanted his condition to appear worse than it actually is? Precisely. To anyone checking standard vital signs, he would appear to have minimal brain activity. In room 307, Rachel sat beside her father's bed, Savannah perched vigilantly nearby. The parrot had refused to leave Frederick's side, exhibiting a protective behavior that baffled the hospital staff but provided strange comfort to Rachel. "I don't understand," Rachel whispered, stroking her father's hand. "Why would anyone do this to you?" Savannah tilted her head, watching Rachel with intelligent eyes. "Look at papers, numbers wrong." Frank, who had stayed well beyond his shift, exchanged glances with Rachel. "The parrot keeps mentioning papers," he said. "Could it be referring to documents your father had?" Rachel shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "Dad was always so careful with his business affairs. Everything was organized, transparent." "Business?" Savannah chirped suddenly, becoming animated. "Lighthouse Project? Patrick knows." Frank's expression darkened. "Patrick Harris, our hospital administrator?" "This is the second time Savannah has connected specific names to this situation," Rachel noted, a new edge in her voice. "First Dr. Mercer, now Patrick." The door opened as Jasmine returned, her face grave as she approached Frederick's bedside. "We've confirmed foreign substances in your father's system that would artificially depress his neurological readings," she explained quietly. "I've ordered the medications purged from his system and started a counter-treatment. We should begin seeing changes within hours." "Who did this?" Rachel demanded, rising from her chair. "And why?" Jasmine hesitated. "I've reported my findings to hospital security and the medical ethics board." "Dr. Mercer has been temporarily suspended pending investigation." "Dr. Mercer?" Frank questioned. "But why would he—" "Lighthouse papers," Savannah interrupted again, more insistently. "Frederick's office, safe behind painting." Rachel stared at the parrot. "My father's office does have a lighthouse painting. It's been there for years." "How would this bird know about your father's office?" Jasmine asked, medical curiosity overriding her skepticism. Rachel shook her head. "I don't know, but I'm going to find out." She stood, determination replacing despair. "Frank, would you stay with my father? Dr. Collins, I'd appreciate if you could continue monitoring his condition." "Of course," Jasmine agreed. "But Rachel, you should know hospital administration is trying to contain this situation. Patrick has already suggested this might be a misunderstanding about palliative care practices." "Patrick again," Rachel murmured, exchanging meaningful glances with Frank. "Savannah, would you come with me?" The parrot immediately hopped onto her outstretched arm, surprising everyone with her willingness to leave Frederick's side. As Rachel left with Savannah, Jasmine turned to Frank. "I've never seen anything like this. That parrot seems to understand exactly what's happening." "I've worked here 20 years, Frank replied, checking Frederick's IV. "Seen a lot of strange things, but nothing like this. It's as if that bird is trying to solve a mystery none of us even knew existed." Meanwhile, across town, Rachel unlocked the door to her father's elegant home office, flipping on lights that illuminated rich mahogany bookshelves and leather furniture. The lighthouse painting hung prominently behind the desk, a beautiful seascape her father had always cherished. Savannah flew directly to it, landing on the frame and tapping her beak against the corner. "Here, look here." With trembling hands, Rachel removed the painting, revealing a wall safe she'd known about but never accessed. "I don't know the combination," she whispered. Savannah bobbed excitedly. 81739. Rachel hesitated only briefly before turning the dial according to the parrot's instructions. The safe clicked open. Inside, lay a leather portfolio labeled Lighthouse Project, Confidential. As Rachel spread the documents across her father's desk, her eyes widened with understanding. Blueprints for a revolutionary outpatient care facility designed specifically for underserved communities, funding commitments, property deeds, and a damning memo from Patrick Harris outlining why Mercy General Hospital should acquire the project and then quietly dismantle it to eliminate competition. They wanted his project, Rachel breathed, the pieces falling into place. But Dad wouldn't sell. Savannah hopped onto the desk, her claws carefully avoiding the papers. Meeting recorded. Watch Frederick's computer. Rachel moved to her father's laptop, opening it to find a folder labeled simply Insurance. Inside was a video file dated 3 days before her father's stroke. The footage showed Frederick in this very office, meeting with Patrick Harris and Dr. Mercer. The conversation started professionally but quickly deteriorated. "Your Lighthouse Project will divert millions in revenue from Mercy General," Patrick was saying, his normally composed demeanor showing cracks of frustration. "Be reasonable, Frederick. Take our offer." Frederick's voice was calm but resolute. "Lighthouse isn't about profit. It's about accessible healthcare for everyone. Something you seem to have forgotten, Patrick." Dr. Mercer leaned forward, his tone menacing. "There are other ways to resolve this situation if you continue to be difficult." The camera captured a critical moment, Patrick nodding subtly to Mercer, a silent communication that spoke volumes. Frederick's response was clear. "Are you threatening me?" "Because I've taken precautions. Every aspect of this project, including this conversation, has been documented and secured. If anything happens to me, everything goes to my attorneys." Rachel paused the video, her hand covering her mouth in horror. "They did this to him," she whispered. "And with me authorizing the end-of-life procedures, they would have eliminated the threat permanently." Savannah made a soft sound, almost like a human sigh. Frederick knew. Frederick prepared. "But how are you connected to all this?" Rachel asked, studying the parrot with new intensity. "How do you know so much about my father and his business?" The parrot bobbed her head, seeming to consider the question. "Professor taught Savannah. Professor was Frederick's friend. Savannah visited many times." Rachel's mind raced, trying to recall her father mentioning a friend with a parrot. Then it clicked. Professor Martin, her father's college roommate and lifelong friend who had passed away months ago. The linguistics expert who, according to her father, owned the smartest bird in the state. "You were Professor Martin's parrot," she said softly. "Did my father continue to visit you after the professor died?" "Frederick came every week. Talked about Lighthouse, about Patrick's threats." Savannah listened, Savannah remembered. Understanding dawned on Rachel. Her father, knowing he might be in danger, had confided in the one witness who could retain information but couldn't be intimidated or bribed, a highly intelligent parrot trained by a linguistics expert to comprehend and contextually use human language. Her phone rang, startling them both. It was Frank. "Rachel, you need to get back here right away," he said, his voice tight with urgency. "Your father is showing signs of responsiveness. Dr. Collins thinks he might regain consciousness soon," and he lowered his voice. "Patrick Harris is trying to take control of the situation. He's brought in hospital legal counsel claiming potential liability issues." "I'm on my way," Rachel replied, gathering the documents. "Frank, don't let anyone near my father except Dr. Collins. No one." As she rushed to the door with Savannah perched on her shoulder and the damning evidence clutched in her hand, Rachel felt a surge of both fury and hope. The bird who had seemed like a random intruder hours ago had revealed herself to be her father's silent guardian, carrying his secrets until they could be safely exposed. What had begun as a day of grief and finality was transforming into something entirely different, a race against time and corruption, with an unlikely winged ally leading the way toward truth and justice. Rachel burst through the hospital entrance, Savannah secure on her shoulder, and the Lighthouse documents clutched firmly against her chest. The evening shift had changed over, leaving the corridors eerily quiet except for the soft squeak of her shoes against the polished floor. Outside room 307, she found Frank standing guard, his broad shoulders squared with determination. The concern in his eyes softened slightly when he saw her. "They're inside," he whispered. Patrick brought the hospital attorney and Dr. Warner from the ethics committee. "Dr. Collins is holding her ground, but they're pushing hard to transfer your father to another facility, claiming specialized care requirements." Rachel's jaw tightened. "They want him somewhere they can control the situation." Frank nodded. "Your father's condition is improving rapidly, too rapidly for their comfort." Inside the room, voices were rising in controlled conflict. Patrick's smooth, authoritative tone contrasted with Jasmine's clipped professional resistance. "The transfer papers are already prepared," Patrick was saying. "Given the unusual circumstances," the unusual circumstances being that someone deliberately administered medications to make Mr. Wheeler appear terminally unresponsive, Jasmine interrupted, her voice sharp. "I've documented every finding. Medical ethics demands we investigate fully before taking any action." Rachel entered, the door swinging wide behind her. All eyes turned toward her, and the parrot perched regally on her shoulder. Patrick's carefully composed expression faltered momentarily. "Ms. Wheeler, we were just discussing your father's care options. We believe a specialized neurological facility would be better equipped to silence him permanently?" Rachel cut in, placing the Lighthouse documents on the bedside table. "Like you tried to do here?" The hospital attorney straightened. "Ms. Wheeler, these are serious allegations that are fully documented right here," Rachel finished, tapping the folder. "Including video evidence of you and Dr. Mercer threatening my father days before his supposed stroke." Patrick's face drained of color. "Whatever you think you have—" "Patrick knows," Savannah suddenly declared, mimicking Frederick's voice with uncanny accuracy. "Everything documented. Safe deposit box. Lawyers have copies." Dr. Warner from the ethics committee stared at the parrot in astonishment. "Did that bird just—" "She did," Jasmine confirmed, moving to check Frederick's vitals. "And she's been right about everything so far, including the fact that Mr. Wheeler was being deliberately kept unconscious through medication that doesn't appear in his official chart." Patrick took a step toward the door, but Frank's imposing figure blocked the exit. "Going somewhere?" the nurse asked quietly. "This is absurd," Patrick hissed, looking from face to face. "You're taking the mimicry of a bird as evidence? I've dedicated my life to this hospital." "And we're willing to destroy lives to protect it," Rachel countered, her voice steady despite the emotion churning within her. "The Lighthouse Project threatened your bottom line, so you and Dr. Mercer conspired to eliminate my father from the equation." As the confrontation escalated, a soft sound from the bed drew everyone's attention. Frederick's fingers were moving, his eyelids fluttering with increasing purpose. Jasmine immediately moved to his side, professional focus overriding everything else. "Mr. Wheeler, Frederick, can you hear me?" The room fell silent as Frederick's eyes slowly opened, confusion giving way to recognition as he scanned the faces surrounding him. His gaze settled on Rachel, the corner of his mouth lifting slightly in what was unmistakably the beginning of a smile. Then his eyes found Savannah, and that small smile grew stronger. "You found her," he whispered, his voice raspy from disuse. Rachel took his hand, tears streaming freely now. "She found us, Dad. She remembered everything you told her." Frederick's eyes moved to Patrick, who had gone completely still. "Recorded everything," he managed, each word a victory against his weakened state. "Martin trained her to remember." Dr. Warner had heard enough. With quiet authority, she stepped forward. "Mr. Harris, I believe we need to continue this discussion with hospital security present." She turned to the hospital attorney. "And I suggest you consider whose interests you're actually representing here." As Patrick was escorted from the room, Savannah flew to Frederick's bed, landing gently beside his pillow. Frederick lifted a shaking hand to stroke her feathers. "Good girl," he whispered. "Smartest bird in the state." Over the next few hours, hospital security took statements, while Frederick continued to improve, his sentences becoming more coherent as the drugs cleared his system. The true story emerged piece by piece. Frederick had suspected Patrick might take drastic action to stop the Lighthouse Project. After receiving explicit threats, he had spent time with Professor Martin's parrot, deliberately discussing his concerns and contingency plans in her presence, knowing her exceptional memory and language abilities might prove useful. Martin always said, "She understood context," Frederick explained, his voice growing stronger. "Not just mimicking, understanding." When Frederick suffered what appeared to be a massive stroke, it was actually an adverse reaction to something slipped into his coffee during a meeting with Dr. Mercer. The doctor had used the opportunity to begin a treatment regimen designed to depress Frederick's neurological functions while appearing to be legitimate care. "They needed my signature," Frederick continued, glancing at Rachel, "or yours, authorizing end-of-life care. The perfect cover." "But how did Savannah find you here?" Frank asked, the practical question that had been overshadowed by larger revelations. Frederick's eyes crinkled with affection as he looked at the parrot. "Martin's apartment faces this wing. After he died, I kept visiting Savannah there. She could see this hospital from her window. She knew. This was where I worked, sometimes." "She recognized you through the window," Jasmine realized. "Birds have remarkable vision." "And knew something was wrong," Rachel added, her hand still holding her father's. By morning, the hospital was in upheaval. Dr. Mercer had been taken into custody after attempting to flee the city. Patrick Harris was suspended, pending a full investigation, his office sealed as evidence. The hospital board had convened an emergency session to address the scandal and prevent damage to the institution's reputation. Dr. Warner, as head of the ethics committee, had been appointed interim administrator. Her first official act was to review the Lighthouse Project documents with Frederick and Rachel. "This outpatient care model is exactly what this community needs," she acknowledged, her initial skepticism replaced by genuine admiration. "The hospital should be supporting this initiative, not obstructing it." 1 week later, Frederick sat in a wheelchair in the hospital garden, sunshine warming his face as he continued his remarkable recovery. Rachel stood beside him while Jasmine reviewed his latest test results with evident satisfaction. "Your neurological function is returning to baseline much faster than I anticipated," she reported, closing his file. "No permanent damage detected. You were fortunate that the medications were identified and countered quickly." "Fortunate to have the right doctor," Frederick replied, with a warm smile that made Jasmine blush slightly. Frank appeared on the garden path, pushing a cart with a large covered object. "Special delivery," he announced cheerfully. When he removed the cover, it revealed a beautiful custom-built aviary on wheels, designed to be both secure and mobile. Inside, Savannah preened her feathers, looking quite pleased with her new accommodation. "The board approved it unanimously," Frank explained. "Mercy General's first official therapy parrot. They're calling it the Savannah Initiative, using trained birds to provide comfort to patients." Rachel laughed, the sound light and free for the first time in weeks. "From hospital invader to staff member, that's quite a promotion." Savannah bobbed excitedly, fixing her intelligent gaze on Frederick. "Lighthouse rising, helping people. Frederick's dream." Frederick reached out to stroke her feathers through the aviary wire. "Our dream now," he corrected gently. The investigation had revealed that Patrick's scheme went deeper than anyone had initially suspected. In his ambition to maximize hospital profits, he had systematically undermined or absorbed several community health initiatives, using Dr. Mercer to provide medical authority for his decisions. The Lighthouse Project, with its potential to redirect millions in outpatient revenue, had simply been the latest target. But thanks to Frederick's foresight and Savannah's extraordinary intervention, it would become Patrick's last. "The board has fast-tracked approval for Lighthouse," Rachel informed her father, unfolding architectural plans across his lap. "Construction begins next month. They're viewing it as a partnership now, not competition." "And what about you?" Frederick asked, his eyes twinkling. "Still planning to return to the city?" Rachel exchanged glances with Frank, whose frequent visits had evolved from professional concern to something more personal. "I think I might stick around," she said softly. "There's important work to be done here." Jasmine checked her watch reluctantly. "I have rounds, but I'll check on you later," she promised Frederick, her professional demeanor softened by genuine affection. As she walked away, Savannah made a sound remarkably like a human chuckle. Frederick likes Doctor. Doctor likes Frederick. Frederick's face flushed slightly. "Impertinent bird," he muttered, though his eyes followed Jasmine's departing figure with unmistakable interest. In the weeks that followed, Frederick's recovery continued to astonish his medical team. The Lighthouse Project broke ground with a community celebration, its mission of accessible healthcare embraced by the very institution that had once tried to destroy it. Patrick and Dr. Mercer faced criminal charges, their trials scheduled for the coming months. Savannah divided her time between Frederick's home, where a sunroom had been converted into a spacious aviary, and the hospital, where she had become something of a celebrity. Children in the pediatric ward delighted in her visits, while elderly patients found comfort in her gentle presence and remarkable ability to engage in what seemed like genuine conversation. On a bright autumn morning, Frederick walked unassisted into Mercy General's newly established community health center. Savannah perched contentedly on his shoulder. Rachel and Frank followed, carrying boxes of brochures for the soon-to-open Lighthouse facility. Dr. Warner greeted them in the lobby, where a small gathering of board members and staff had assembled for the unveiling of a commemorative plaque. As the cloth covering was removed, applause filled the space. The bronze plaque read, "The Savannah Wing, where compassionate care takes flight. Established in honor of extraordinary intervention and the enduring power of giving voice to those who cannot speak for themselves." Below the text was an engraved image of an African grey parrot, wings spread in protective vigilance. Savannah studied the plaque, tilting her head thoughtfully before speaking in her clearest voice. "Truth finds a way, always finds a way." Frederick placed his hand gently on the bird's head, his eyes meeting Rachel's over the assembled crowd. What had begun as a tragic ending had transformed into a new beginning, not just for them, but for countless others who would benefit from the Lighthouse Project and the reformed practices at Mercy General. As sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating the gathering of people whose lives had been unexpectedly intertwined by one parrot's remarkable intervention, Frederick whispered a truth that had emerged from their ordeal. Sometimes the most profound wisdom comes from the most unexpected sources, and sometimes when human voices fail, other voices rise to speak truth to power. Savannah bobbed her head in what looked remarkably like agreement, her mission fulfilled, but her watchful guardianship far from over. In a hospital once shadowed by corruption, a new day had dawned. Guided by the wing beats of an unlikely hero, who had proven that even the smallest voice could change everything, if only people would listen. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the world of captivating stories. I trust you found today's narrative as engaging as I did. If you enjoyed this exploration into fascinating and compelling narratives, kindly indicate your appreciation by liking this video. Are you watching on mobile? Show your appreciation with a double tap for hype. For more captivating stories and journeys into the heart of compelling storytelling, please subscribe to the channel and activate notifications so you don't miss a single upload. Your thoughts and interpretations are most welcome. Please share your perspectives on today's story in the comments below. And if you believe others would find this content engaging, please consider sharing the video with your network. Until our next journey into the world of captivating tales, I bid you farewell.